Hello, thank you very much for coming along and joining me on tonight's stream. Tonight we're going to be talking about Chocolatey and Chocolatey Source Code, and we're going to be digging into, hopefully, at least starting the process of creating a new command that we can execute when we run choco.exe from the command line. So I just wanted to start with a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. The first one is that if you're interested in following along with any of the things that I do from a coding perspective or from a configuration perspective on any of these streams that I'm doing, what I've added into my GitHub repository here for live streams is a Vagrant file. So for anyone that doesn't know, Vagrant is a tool that allows the creation and provisioning of a virtual machine. So that's exactly what I've done, and that's exactly what you're looking at here. I've created a VM using Vagrant, and I have told it a set of instructions for setting up this VM. So I've told it how much RAM I want to give it, what the network configuration is, and then down here at the bottom, I've told it what scripts that I want to run. So I've got some scripts for setting up Windows, how I want it to be set up. I've obviously got it to install Chocolatey because I want to use that to provision. I've just seen a note in my... I hope it's not quiet. Can anyone else confirm the note from Kendall there? I see that there's an Andrew and a Skinny Seahorse in the chat room as well. Is it coming through quietly for both of you guys as well? Can anyone confirm or deny what's happening? Let me just see. Could be a little higher. Okay, so now we're going to delve into... let's see if we can bump this up a little bit and see what happens here. Has that had any effect for you? Kim, I'm asking you at this point. Is that a little bit higher than it was before? Anybody else on the stream? Not really. Okay, so that didn't have any effect. Okay, so Monix is saying he can hear me perfectly. So okay, I'm gonna continue on the basis that at least one person is okay. I will take a note to look into that after this stream to see if I can improve that any. I haven't changed any of the settings I'm aware of from the last stream, so I'm going to continue. If it's really a problem and anybody is familiar with exactly what to do in OBS, I would be willing to try any suggestions that you might have. So what I was saying there was, in terms of setting up for this live stream, I've got this Vagrant file that allows me to install all the applications that I want and that I need in order to do what I want to do. So in the case of this stream, I'm going to be digging into source code rather. So I need Visual Studio, I need Visual Studio Code, I need some other bits and pieces set up so that I can do what I need to do. So all of that is done within these 4 or 5 scripts at the bottom here. So down here, each of those are looking at a shell folder, and within that shell folder these are the PowerShell scripts that I'm executing as part of the process of bringing up that VM. So the main one of interest here is really what I'm installing. So when I went and did a Vagrant up on this machine, I have installed Visual Studio and a couple of workloads. I've installed .NET Core, VS Code, and then some VS Code extensions. I've installed Git, PoshGit, KDiff, all of these things that I'm going to need in order to perform this stream. So if anybody wants to follow along, either just now or after the fact, then, like I say, there is a Vagrant file now in my live streams repository that will literally set it up as per I've got it right now. The other things that I wanted to point out is that it was noted that I should include my chat or the Twitch chat into my stream. So hopefully it's all working. And over on that side of the screen, you should see the chat history that's been there to date. If that makes sense to everyone, I'm going to keep it. I'm toying around with it a little bit. I haven't decided if it's a good idea yet or not, but we're going to go with it. And it'll be there mainly for if and when the video is being watched back on YouTube. The chat history will be there, ready for people to view what's going on. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about before we jump into any code is to start looking at where all the source code for Chocolatey lives. So almost all of the open source code, or rather I should say that differently, all the open source code for Chocolatey lives on the Chocolatey organization on GitHub. So that's just github.com/Chocolatey. Now, there are 39 different repositories in this organization. So knowing where to start and what repository you need to look at can be a little bit daunting. What I ended up writing just this week, actually, was a blog post about what each of those repositories are and whether or not you would need to use them. Okay? One of the prime examples of this is there's both a Choco repository and there's a Chocolatey repository on the Chocolatey organization on GitHub. So immediately you could be thinking, why are there two there? So what I'm going into here in just a little bit of detail is what those repositories are and why they're there. So in this example, the Chocolatey repository is the original PowerShell implementation of Chocolatey itself. So Chocolatey, when it first started, was on written in PowerShell. Now, in around 2014, it was rewritten as a C# executable rather than a set of PowerShell commandlets and modules. So that's why there are two separate repositories. Going forward, as of today, Choco is the main repository that you want to look at, and Chocolatey is really there just for historical reasons. If you ever want to look back to see how things were done in the PowerShell implementation, that's where you go to look at the source code for that. Morris is noting that the blog post should be on chocolatey.org. Possibly. I think some of this information is probably spread out within different parts of chocolatey.org. I wrote it as a blog post, mainly for my own thought processes as well. If anyone's read through this, they'll see here that there was a section for, which one was it? It was this chocolatey.web. I genuinely had no idea what that repository was for. It was on the Chocolatey organization. I had no idea what it was. So thankfully, Rob actually left a comment at the bottom of the blog post to go into a little bit more detail and a few clarifications around some of the repositories and what they were there for. So perhaps this will be moved into chocolatey.org proper as part of our documentation. For now, this was mainly for me to know what everything was for and to be able to provide an answer to a question that I was asked on Twitter. So that's where we're going to start, and where we're going to start is in. So what I want to do, we're probably not going to get. So there's a question there from Pascal in the chat room. Any reason why the Chocolatey repository is not archived? Short answer is no. There's no reason that I don't think it can. There's no reason that it can't be archived. I think you're referring to the GitHub functionality where you can actually mark it as an archived repository so that you can no longer create issues or make any commits into it. I know that I have access to that because I am a member of a GitHub maintainers group that gives you access to that. If that's now a public feature, then we can definitely look to getting that switched on, yes. But that will be a question for a different day. I think at this point we could say that the Chocolatey repository could be archived, yes, on GitHub. And Matthias is saying that we should go ahead and do it. I'm not going to do that right now because that's going to take me away from what I am trying to do. So I'll leave that for another day. So what I want to be able to do, if we walk up to Chocolatey just now and we go into the help documentation, then as of right now, there are lots of different commands that the chocolatey.exe can execute. So there's familiar ones in here in terms of install, uninstall, outdated, doing configuration, doing features, various different things. But one of the things that's not included is the ability to export a list of the currently installed packages on your system. So we could walk up and we can go choco list local only, and we can ask what packages are currently installed on this machine. But there's no easy way of exporting that information into a packages.config file. So the reason that's important is because if you are doing a choco install command, so obviously I could do choco install fiddler as an example. But what we can also do is we can pass into a choco install command a packages.config file. That's the same format and structure of a packages.config file that would be used by NuGet. So it would allow us to have a list of packages that we wanted to install, right? Now, that's important because that then allows us to have a backup, essentially, of all of the packages that we want installed on our machine. So the ability to have and generate that packages.config file is something that a lot of people have asked for. Because if you actually walk up to the issues list, there is actually an issue already created to provide this functionality. Someone asked for this back in 2015. So it's a really early issue that someone expressed an interest in. It's just due to prioritization and other reasons, it's never been implemented. So what I would like to be able to do is I would like to be able to walk up to choco.exe, and I want to be able to run the export command. Now, in the first iteration of this, the choco export command will probably just export a hard-coded packages.config file, just so that we can prove out the concept. But we're likely going to expand that export command to have different parameters. The first parameter that makes sense would be giving it a file name, where you want that file to be exported to. You might want to include an additional parameter for including the version number of the package that's currently installed, because you may want to have a like-for-like installation once you put it onto a new machine. And another parameter might be the ability to include the persisted arguments that were passed in as part of the original installation. So all of these things can come afterwards. What I'm hoping to show within this stream, it might run into the next stream, will be the ability to add a new command into the choco.exe, and then we can add on the additional parameters that we want to have included in that command. So Maurice is mentioning there in the chat that one of the community maintainers, Bill Curran, has a script that exports those packages into a packages.config file. And that's absolutely correct. So Bill has a package that is called, I forget exactly what it's called, but essentially it does the exact same thing. But it does it in a way it does it indirectly. So it will make use of, I assume, it will make use of the choco list local only command, and then it will take that information that it gets from the command line, it'll parse it, and then it'll put it into the packages.config file. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that approach. In actual fact, that's the same approach that is used in the Chocolatey GUI. So for a long time, the Chocolatey GUI has had an export option. So from this PC, I can go up here and I can say export, and then I'll just put this onto the C drive, and I'll just call this packages.config, and then if I go and look at that in the temp folder, C temp, and then if I look at the packages.config, then what it will show me is a packages.config file that has all of the packages and the version number. So both Chocolatey GUI and Bill's export packages package is doing the same thing. It's using the output of Chocolist local only, and then it's parsing that output and then putting it into the packages.config file. That's an absolutely valid approach. There's actually a few different ways of doing that. There's actually a few gists or gists out there that do the exact same thing. But by adding it directly into the Chocolatey exe or the choco.exe, it removes that necessary need to include the parsing of the command line output, and it also opens up the potential for doing things like including the upgrade arguments that have been persisted into Chocolatey itself. So there's good reason for doing it as a first party citizen, if you like, within the choco.exe. And like I say, what I'm hoping to show is how we can start to do that process by looking at some of the Chocolatey source code. So if I just close down Chocolatey GUI just now and go back over to Chrome, I think I'd shown everything that I wanted to show here. So the process for making a contribution to Chocolatey itself is reasonably well documented. So if you go to the GitHub repository and look at the contributing document, then there is a whole host of information available there in terms of what you need to do, in terms of making sure you have a fork of the repository, making sure you create a branch, making sure you submit a PR with the correct commit comments, all that sort of things. So I'm not going to labor the point. I would point you to this document if you were at all interested in following up with some of that. What I'll do is I'll do a very quick run through of setting it up on my machine here, and we can see what needs to be done for the bare minimum of making a contribution into chocolatey.org. So the first thing that we need to do, if I just clean this out, is I need to create a fork of the Choco repository. Now I already have one of those. So if I go up here and just change the URL slightly to be get13 Choco, then this is my repository. This is my fork of the Chocolatey Choco repository from GitHub. So I can go up to here and I will go ahead and grab that URL, and I'm just going to clone this locally into, I'm going to create a new folder called Chocolatey within my C GitHub organizations. This is totally my standard, if you like, of how to do things. There's no requirement that you create this folder structure. This is just the way that I do it. So I'm going to go ahead and clone that into here. So this is going to be my fork, which is going to be pointed at the origin in Git parlance. So if I then cd into the Choco folder, what I then want to do is I want to create an upstream remote back to Chocolatey Choco, so I can have that as a reference if I need to update it and pull it in. Question there in the chat from Manfred is, am I using Poshgit? Yes, I am. I'm using Poshgit. Poshgit is what provides this information in terms of what branch I'm currently on, whether there's any changes in my Git working directory, all that sort of thing. So yes, I'm using Poshgit on the command line here to provide some of that information. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new upstream remote pointing at Chocolatey Choco. So then if I do a git remote -v, I'll be able to see both of those remotes in place. So I've got an origin pointing at my fork, and then I've got another remote pointing at upstream. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that my fork is up to date with what's on the upstream repository, which is Chocolatey Choco. So I'm just going to do a git fetch of the upstream remote, and then it looks like I had some changes that haven't been pulled in yet, so I'm just going to rebase my master branch on the upstream master, and then I'm going to push that to the origin so that everything is up to date. It looks like maybe it was the stable that was out of date, so let's do a git checkout. Make sure that everything's up to date. Checkout stable, and that's going to be origin stable. There we go, and then I'll just do a git vet git rebase of the upstream stable. There we go, git push origin. Okay, so that's now everything up to date. So if you have just done a fresh clone or a fresh fork of the repository, you won't need to do this step. That's just because I already had it. What it does bring up, though, is this distinction between master and stable. In terms of the way that contributions into Chocolatey Choco works, we would request that any pull request get targeted against the master branch rather than the stable branch. There are some occasions where we might ask you to target stable for any pull request that you're making, especially Kim's saying that we can't see the branch names. Oh, that's because my head's in the way. Kim's pointing out that you can't see the branch names. That's because my head is in the way. Let's see if I can grab this and make it a little bit smaller so that we can see everything. There we go. So what I was saying was, when you are making a contribution into Chocolatey Choco, typically you're going to want to target the master branch. Now there are some occasions where targeting stable branch will be requested from the person who's maybe reviewing the pull request that you're creating, but typically stable is the one is reserved for if there is an immediate bug fix that needs to get released. We'll target stable rather than master. For any sort of feature requests, you're going to want to target the master branch. So that's where we're going to start this process. We're on the master branch here. And then if we look at the issue that I had here a second ago, before we went to the contributing document, the issue in question was 357. So the nomenclature that I use personally is to create a branch with the issue name in the actual branch name. So I'm going to check out a new branch here called issue, and I've already forgotten what it was. I think it was 357, issue 357. So I'm going to call it issue 357, and just to be specific, because I know that sometimes that can trip you up if you're not specific about things in Git. I'm just going to say git checkout one called issue 357 from the master branch. So now I'm on a branch that's ready for doing some work, right? So what I'm going to want to do is to show you how to not do things to start with, because there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of. So the first one is, if I go up to Visual Studio here and I just open that solution that I've just cloned. So we'll go up to here, C, Git, Organizations, Chocolatey, Choco, Source, and then the Chocolatey solution. If I just try and build this right now, it's going to fail, right? And it's going to fail for a reason, and I want to explore that a little bit so that it doesn't trip anyone up. Now, the reason in question is documented, but unfortunately, not everyone always reads the documentation, even though there is some. But if I just go up here and try and build this solution, we'll give it a clean, and then we will wait for that to finish, and then we will build the solution. Then that is going to generate an error. So there we go. It will generate lots of errors, actually. So there are 8 errors there, and most of them are all around this missing solution version.cs. So if we look here in the Solution Explorer, and expand the properties. No, where's the one I want? Let's minimize all of these. Let's look in Chocolatey. There is this solution version.cs file. So as far as the C# project is concerned, there should be a solution version.cs file on the file system. But if we go up to here and then say open folder file explorer, then up in here there is no solution version.cs file. Now the reason that there isn't one is because that solution version.cs file is generated as part of the overall build process that is actually done outside of Visual Studio. So in order to make sure that Chocolatey builds successfully on continuous integration servers, we don't rely on the build solely out of Visual Studio. We run the build outside of Visual Studio directly with MS Build, and it actually uses a system based on Nant called Uppercut. So if we go slightly further up through the source code, there is a build.bat file here, and this build.bat file actually invokes the underlying Nant build system, which really underpins Uppercut, and then it's responsible for generating that solution version.cs file, as well as then running the tests, generating the output, generating the nutkeg that actually the end result of the build process. So what we actually need to do is we need to get that build.bat file building it first, so that the solution version.cs file is created, and then at that point we can then build and execute Chocolatey from within Visual Studio. So all that being said, if we just try and run build.bat from the command line here, we'll see that happen. But we'll also see it fail, right? Now, it failed because the Nant is, there's no easy way to say this, Nant is an older technology stack now, and there is a requirement that .NET Framework 3.5 be installed. We have talked about the possibility of moving the Chocolatey build process away from using Uppercut to using something else. Some people on the Twitch chat might not be surprised to learn that the number one candidate for that would be Cake, because I'm also a maintainer of that project, that open source project. But we haven't put the work in yet to do that. We have for some of the components that make up Chocolatey. So for an example, Chocolatey GUI is built using Cake rather than Uppercut, and also some of the licensed components of Chocolatey, for example, the Chocolatey Central Management System, it also uses Cake to do the build process rather than Uppercut. So slowly but surely we will probably move everything to be a Cake build rather than an Uppercut build. But for now, what we need to do is we need to get .NET 3.5 installed on this machine. So that's one of the reasons that I set up my Vagrant instance to already have Chocolatey installed, so I could just do that installation. And I'm going to try and remember what the package name is. It is just .NET 3.5. So if I just do a Choco install of .NET 3.5, then we'll get that installed. Now, I didn't do that as part of my Vagrant file setup. I could have, but I decided not to because I knew that this was an error, and I wanted to show you guys this happening in case you run into it as well. Yes, so there's some interesting comments in the chat there. For those of you who don't know, Manfred is referring to the fact that Uppercut is part of what's known as the Chuck Norris framework. So there's a few utility tools in there. There's Dropkick, there's Roundhouse, there's Uppercut. So all of those were actually spearheaded and pioneered by Rob Reynolds, the creator of Chocolatey. He has since handed over the reins of some of those tools as his work on Chocolatey has become a higher priority. And he's looked at Cake and how it does certain things, and he likes the way it's doing it. So that's kind of why we're thinking about moving the build processes over to Cake. And Matthias in the chat room there has made a very good point that obviously Chocolatey and Cake make a delicious combination. So why would you not want to use Chocolatey and Cake together? Because at the minute you can run Chocolatey from Cake, so it makes sense that we use Cake to build Chocolatey as well. So I'm just going to let that .NET 3.5 installation run. I forget whether I'm going to need to reboot the machine, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And for now, I'm hoping that this is going to finish soon. Let's just have a quick look and see what else is going on in this machine. That's actually good. That big red text normally means a bad thing. And in this scenario, it does mean a bad thing. Normally, I was expecting a big chunk of red at the end there, because normally what you get here is a chunk of XML being output to the console, which normally outputs in red text. But I wasn't necessarily expecting the failure at the end there. So let's reboot the machine at that point, I think, because I don't like that error message. And I'm wondering whether I had a pending installation that was... Let's just reboot. Oh, I've got some updates pending. Update and this could take a while. This is not a good start to this stream. Let's do this. Let's just see if it made it in. .NET versions. Have I not got that installed? What I was trying to show there was what version of .NET I have installed. Let's go back up to C, program data, Chocolatey, lib, .NET version. I don't have it installed. The application that I wanted was, let's just do this, Chocolatey install .NET version detector. Anyone that was on my last stream will know about the .NET version detector and what it's for, but it's a utility tool that allows you to easily see what .NET frameworks that you got installed, and it uses a command line which is .NET versions, and then from there you can see what is installed. I don't really want to reboot my machine right now because I don't know how long that update will take. So let's try and cheat a little bit. Turn Windows features on and off. I think .NET 3.5 is just a feature that we can restart computer force. That could work. Although it says it's there. Let's just try the NAMP build one more time, and then we will see if we need to force a restart of the machine. C, GitHub, organizations, Chocolatey, Choco, and then let's just do the build.bat one more time. Yeah, let's do a force restart of the machine and see if that will bring it back to life. Restart computer force. It's doing Windows updates anyway. Okay then. While we're waiting on that, any questions about anything that's come up so far? I really wasn't expecting to have to be doing Windows updates during this stream, but I guess that's the way it goes. This would be a great opportunity for someone to ask a really long question that needs an answer. Indeed, it's not the den. Oh, it wasn't too bad. Okay, so I should maybe hide my other PowerShell that I've got going on behind the stream so that you guys can't see behind the scenes. Let's wait for our Vagrant box to come back up again. Oh, still 62%. Okay. Oh no, it's not going too badly. It's not going to take as long as I thought it was going to. And yes, that will expire soon. That I knew about. Let's just drag this down a little bit. And hope that that's going to resize. Yes, it did. Okay. Do you have a fast computer? Maybe Maurice. I don't. I wouldn't say it's the state of the art. It's a good few years old now, the rig that I'm using here, but it's doing well so far. So let's see if .NET 3.5 has successfully made it into .NET versions again. See if it appears now. It did. Okay, so it's looking better. So we have .NET 3.5 installed now. So the Choco failure must have solely been down to those updates that were happening. There was a pending reboot that was preventing the installation correctly of .NET 3.5. So let's cd back into that GitHub organizations, Chocolatey and Choco. So now, if we run that build.bat file again, hopefully this time it's going to work. And it looks like it's getting further down the process. Although it's failing for another reason. Don't you just love this? Retro detonate indeed. Okay, so the reason that it's failing is because of NuGet, right? So Pascal is on the call, and he knows all about how interesting NuGet can be when it comes to doing certain things. And yes, Kim, it is the NuGet restore step that's failing, and you'll see here that it's failing specifically because it was unable to find coveralls.io and NuGetRunners.io, or sorry, NUnit.runners. Now, the reason that's failing is because the way that at some point NuGet.exe changed something in the way that the sources that are being used are set up, right? So what we need to do is we need to modify a user level NuGet.config file to include an additional source for the NuGet restore to work correctly. Now I'm going to go over to a repository. I'm going to go over to a document on another machine that you guys can't see, where I have that information written down so that I don't forget it. And if I go to Matthias is making the point that NuGet is the gift that keeps on giving, and it is. NuGet does get a bad rep sometimes. When it works, it works. But when there are things like this that come up, it does sometimes take a while to figure out what's going on. Now, this particular issue, I think it took me the best part of a day to figure out why this wasn't working. Which is not ideal, obviously, but these are the things that we have to do. This is why we document things, so that we don't have to remember them again. So let me just find the document that I am interested in. So that's going to be in here, and it's going to be in here. So what I need to do is I need to go into, let's just find out where everything is, just to make sure. Oh, I'm still on to. Just save me typing out some of this. Even work? Oh, okay. Let's just make sure we're in the right place. So we're going to go into the environment folder, get folder path for application data. just see where we are on this machine. So we're in the users Vagrant folder. So we're going to go C, users, Vagrant, app data, roaming. And then in here, there's a NuGet folder. And in here, there's a NuGet.config file. If we open that up, what we will find is that by default, NuGet.org is looking at the v3 feed. Now, some of the packages that we are interested in, and the ones don't exist for whatever reason, they don't exist on that v3 feed. So we need to add another one that looks back at the v2 feed. So in here, I'm just going to add another key, and I'm going to call it what I've called it before, which is, I'm going to go with NuGet2, NuGet2, value equals, and then the value that I'm interested in is just https www.nuget.org/API/v2. And by virtue of it appearing ahead of the other one, I think that's all I need to do to make that work. So if we now go back to here and run that build again, I think it will be able to find those two packages as part of that NuGet restore. Tace is screaming at me in the chat room about ending the tag. What did I miss? Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, good point. Is that better for your OCD there, Matthias? So now it's working. So the all of those NuGet packages have been restored, and now the build should complete. So we should get through. It'll go through unit tests. It'll go through packaging. It'll go through IL merging. If I was on a machine that had the Chocolatey signing certificate on it, it would actually sign all of the PowerShell scripts. It would sign the nutkeg. It would sign the DLLs and the EXEs. That won't happen on this machine because I don't have the code signing certificate. I've set this machine up in the exact same way as anyone who is looking to contribute to Chocolatey would have. They're not going to have the code signing certificates. So certain parts of the build process won't work, but the build should still complete. So hopefully that now completed. And if we go back into this folder, what we should see is a newly generated code drop folder. And in that code drop folder, these are all the artifacts that were created as part of the build process. And the one that we're really interested in seeing, just to make sure that it worked the way we wanted to, is that over here, we've now got a Chocolatey nutkeg and a Chocolatey lib nutkeg. So one of those is a Chocolatey package that would ultimately get pushed to chocolatey.org. And this one is actually a NuGet package that would get pushed to NuGet. Did I say that right? This one is the Chocolatey package that would get pushed to chocolatey.org. And this one is actually a NuGet package that would get pushed to NuGet.org. The distinction there is that one is the choco.exe. That's what is installed whenever you run the installation script from chocolatey.org. This one is the client library for executing Chocolatey from somewhere else. So, for example, Chocolatey GUI makes use of the Chocolatey lib. So rather than shelling out to the choco.exe like it used to do, Chocolatey GUI now makes use of the Chocolatey lib. So it's a DLL that contains all of the functionality of Chocolatey, the chocopat command, the choco lib, the choco list, the choco install, uninstall. All of that is contained within the choco lib, a DLL that Chocolatey itself references, but also Chocolatey GUI on any other third-party application that wanted to make use of Chocolatey can do so with the Chocolatey lib, which is available on NuGet.org. So if we go over here and look at NuGet.org and we search for Chocolatey, and I'm going to spell it right, Chocolatey, then we have the Chocolatey lib. So over here, this is what you would use if you wanted to create an application that was based on Chocolatey. Okay? So the other thing that build process did for us is if we... Oh, I should have not closed that other one. The other thing that will have done for us is that in the source folder, we've now got the solution version.cs file. That's the missing file that was causing our Visual Studio build to fail. So now if we open up that solution again, we should now be able to build Chocolatey from within Visual Studio. So that's the solution that I'm interested in there. So let's get that open. And at this point, I'm expecting the build to work. So if this build doesn't work, this is where everything just goes off the deep end. And we would then be fault finding to figure out what's going on. So let's walk up to here and just clean the solution. That's a habit of mine whenever I open a new solution in Visual Studio. And then let's go ahead and rebuild this and see if we can get no errors. So it's building. It's building. We've got warnings, but we've got no errors. Okay, perfect. So now we're in a position to actually do something. Do something that's hopefully useful. So the first thing that I want to point out, because this tripped me up for a long time when I first started contributing to Chocolatey. So the first thing we want to make sure is that the default startup, the default start project is the Chocolatey console. So that's the one that will generate choco.exe. This Chocolatey project is what generates the chocolatey.lib NuGet package, and this one, chocolatey.resources, contains everything else. So this is a reasonably big project in terms of the number of files and the size of the files that is contained within it. So this project contains all of the helper functions, all of the commandlets that are used as part of Chocolatey. So in here you would find things like install Chocolatey package, install Chocolatey zip package, all of those commandlets. But you'd also find all of the dependencies of Chocolatey itself. So Chocolatey takes a dependency on a couple of external tools, the main one being 7-zip, the other one the shimgem.exe, and the checksum.exe. Those are included within this chocolatey.resources project. So to all intents and purposes, this one you should not really need to play with unless you're playing with the PowerShell side of things within Chocolatey. If you're making a change to a commandlet, then this is the project that you would be looking at. If you're wanting to make a change to the internals of how Chocolatey itself works, then it would be within this Chocolatey project here. This would be the main one that we're going to be looking at. Okay. But the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is if we look at the properties for this project, and we look at the debug section, what we can add, once we start digging into writing Chocolatey code, we obviously want to be able to debug it. Now, in order to debug it, there are several ways that could be done. We could invoke choco.exe and we could try and attach to the process, or we could just run it directly out of Visual Studio, and that's ultimately what I'm going to do, right? But the thing that I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page about is that because I've got Chocolatey installed on my machine here, so if I do choco list local only here, I'm going to get a list of 60 packages that I have installed as part of this machine, right? If I go to here and I say list local only here as the command line arguments to the output of this build, so as I said, the output of this build is choco.exe itself. So if I run this project in debug and I pass in these command line arguments, then you would expect maybe that we get 60 packages installed returned as the output of that. So let's give it a try. I'm just going to run this build and I'm going to pass in those arguments of list local only, and we're going to see what happens. So hopefully you can see here. Let's maybe make this a little bit bigger since it created a new instance. Then the first thing we'll see is that we're running a debug build. So the fact that we're running out of Visual Studio and we're running with non-signed assemblies, Chocolatey itself has detected that we're running a debug build. And you'll get some additional information here that it's not an official build, so if you were trying to run an exe that was generated from this build, then you would need to pass in this additional command line argument to make it work. But the important thing, and the thing I was trying to tell you about, is that we've got 0 packages installed. Now, over here in this PowerShell session, I had 60 packages installed. But in this one, I've got 0 packages installed. Now, the reason that that happens is because essentially, I've now got 2 instances of Chocolatey installed on this machine. The first one is in where you would expect it to be. It's in the C program data Chocolatey lib folder. So these in here, those are my 60 packages that I installed, or I have installed, on the Chocolatey that's installed at the highest level on my machine within that C program data folder. However, as a result of building out of Visual Studio, I've now got a second installation of Chocolatey. So if I go into the Chocolatey Choco folder and then look in the source folder and then the Chocolatey console, bin, debug, I've now got a second instance of Chocolatey installed here. So you'll see that there are some similar folder structures here. So if I open up another Windows Explorer, and we'll just do a side-by-side comparison. So that was in C, program data, Chocolatey. Okay, so over here, there's a config folder. Over here, there's a config folder. There's a helpers folder, logs, and so on. So you'll see that the one that's missing over here is the lib folder. So in this, on the right-hand side, in this installation of Chocolatey, I don't actually have any packages installed because there's nothing in the lib folder. I've got a choco.exe, and I've got all of the other parts that are required to make Chocolatey itself work, but I don't actually have any packages installed. So to get a package installed, I can just run this instance of Chocolatey again. So in theory, I could go to that choco.exe that's in that folder and run Chocolatey from there rather than the globally installed Chocolatey. But I can also just do it from here as well. So let's just say choco install, and because I used it earlier, let's use .NET version detector to see what that does. So all I've done there is the same command that I would run from the command line, but I'm doing it through this instance of Visual Studio. So what we should get is now over on this right hand side, it's downloaded the package that is the NuGet version detector, and it's extracted that nupkeg, and it's now attempting to run the chocolatey install.ps1 file. It's prompting for confirmation from the command line, so that's what we'll go ahead and do. And then it should install that tool, and then we have one package now installed in this instance of Chocolatey. Okay. So then, if I go back into Visual Studio and do my choco list local only and run that, to labour the point a little bit, this should now output one package installed, and that one package is the .NET version detector at 17.1.2. Okay, so it's a really useful way, once you know what's going on, it's a really useful way of segregating your packages that you have installed on your machine, and you want to leave them there and not mess with them. But you've also got this other instance of Chocolatey that you can use for testing purposes. So you just have to make that switch to ensure that any packages that you need for testing or any configuration that you need is done on that second instance rather than on that first instance. Okay? Right. So that's pretty much all of the setup done. So we're now in a position where we have the Chocolatey source code exported or cloned. We have a branch that's ready for making changes. and we know what issue we're targeting as part of that work. So really what we need to start doing now is start looking at some source code. Right. So the thing I should have pointed out at the start of the stream is I know conceptually what I want to do to create that new export command, but I haven't looked at that export or that command structure in a while. So a little bit of this is likely going to be me feeling my way through the source code to try and figure out how things are done. So there might be a little bit of stumbling along the way, but hopefully we'll get there. So feel free to chime in if you think I've missed something, because in all likelihood I will. But I did have a very quick look at the source code earlier, just before the stream, and the parts that we're interested in is within this infrastructure.app folder. So that's really where the core pieces of the source code live. Now there is another infrastructure folder. Now that infrastructure folder is really the setup and the configuration of the app itself. So in here you'll find interfaces and utilities that are made up that are common across multiple applications. So in here, for instance, there is information about a kind of an abstraction at the file system level. So rather than using system.io directly, there's an abstraction of the file system so that you can mock that as part of unit testing and all that sort of stuff. So everything that's in infrastructure can really be thought of as common code that could be potentially used across multiple projects. Everything that is in the infrastructure.app folder is code that's specific to this project. So this instance of a Visual Studio solution. Now the reason that kind of came about is it's a convention that Rob has used across all of the projects that he's worked on. I've seen it on multiple of the projects that he's created. And it actually stems from the fact that I think he used a tool called Warmup, and that he had a warm-up template that would take this common code and kind of always put it into a new project that he was creating, just so there was consistency across those projects going from one to another. There was a common baseline of code in order to make use of. So that's what the infrastructure folder is about. The infrastructure app one is where we're going to be looking at the code. So in here, there is a list of commands. So hopefully you guys can see this in the Solution Explorer here. So the one that I'm going to use as an example is the choco pin command. So it's a reasonably small command that we can use as hopefully a basis for the command that we want to implement, which is the export command. So what we'll see here is that there is a top-level class called the Chocolatey pin command that implements an I command interface that we're going to need to implement within our export command. There are some virtual methods here that we're going to need to take care of to ensure that we are providing the necessary functionality for a new command. So there's things in here like creating a help message. So right now, if I go up to Chocolatey and I do choco pin -h, then what's output here to the command line is the information that's coming from this help message. So if as an example, I set a breakpoint here and we go back into that debug for the properties of the project. Oops, not what properties. And then let's do the same command in this running instance. So we can do pin -h and run that. Then we should hit that breakpoint because it's then going to trigger that section of the code. And that still seems to be doing the choco list. Oh, I see what I did there. I did it on the wrong project. So let's try that again. That was on the Chocolatey project, not the Chocolatey console. So that was down here. Properties. Pin -h, and I run that. Then we should hit that breakpoint because it will trigger that section of code to display that help message. So we should be able to use this pin command is a template for what we want to do with the export. So let's go ahead and jump in, and we're just going to add a new class here, and following the naming convention that we've got there, we're going to call it the Chocolatey export command.cs. There's a question in the chat room there. Is there an easy way of debugging an interactive Chocolatey console, i.e. you've got to actually manually invoke a choco command for the breakpoint to be hit? Yes, effectively. In order to debug out of Visual Studio, you need to have a process that you can attach the debugger to. Now, the easiest way of doing that is to launch choco.exe from Visual Studio. Then it automatically hooks up the debugger to that running process so that you're able to step through the code. If you were able to launch choco.exe and find the process ID for that running instance of Chocolatey, then you could attach manually to that choco.exe process, but most likely that process would probably have completed before you actually got the debugger attached to it. So there are ways that you could do that within by using like a debugger.break within the source code to force the execution of that exe to halt so that you could attach the debugger. But yeah, it's probably easiest just to do it out of Visual Studio and modify the command that you're running to what you're actually trying to the code that you're trying to exercise, and then step into the debugger that way. So hopefully that makes sense. So ultimately, as a first test, what we want to do is I want to do choco export -h to actually have the help message so that we know that we've at least started the process of having the export command available for execution. Now, having created that Chocolatey export command, I will set that to be public, and I will add in the I command interface, which is missing at the minute, but hopefully that's going to appear. Using Chocolatey infrastructure commands, sure. And then that's likely going to need some implementations before it does anything. So let's go ahead and implement that interface and see what we need in order for it to function. So one of those is the help message. So it's throwing, at the minute, it's throwing a not implemented exception. And if we look back at the choco pin command, essentially what we're doing is just logging at this point. We're just using this.log, which is a NuGet package that's included within this project that allows easy output to the command line. So for now, let's just go ahead and do this.log. And what sort of structure is it using? Yeah, we'll worry about keeping it nice and intact later. For now, we'll just do an info of export. I can't type export command. Okay, so all other things being equal, we have an implementation of the help message. So depending on how this works, this is either going to fail remarkably, which it did, or it's going to work. Now, the reason that I thought that it might just work is because I know that in some of the code base, in some code bases that I know that Rob's worked with, it would search for any instances of an I command, and it would automatically register that as part of the execution. So that's obviously not what's happened here. So somewhere in the code base, we're going to need to add that command to the process, or rather, we're going to need to add that command into the hierarchy of what's available, and then defer the export command on the command line to that command that we've just created here. So, the one thing I noticed is we will probably want to add this as well, just so that there's some tie-up there between the two. So this is going to be a command for export, and then this is going to suppresses updates of a package. So this is going to be exports list of currently installed packages. And then that command for is missing a reference, so let's add that attribute as well. And let's just tidy up the missing unused ones in a minute. And because I know that certain things need to be in the right order, let's just put the system usings above everything else. So if we go back to the chocolatey pin command and we look to see all the places that chocolatey pin command is referenced, and for now we will ignore the tests, but ultimately we're probably going to want to create some unit tests and some integration tests around this new command so that we can be sure that it's working how we expect it to. For now, we'll just look at where the choco pin command is actually being used. So we'll see here that within this container, so this container is an instance of Simple Injector. Simple Injector is the IOC container that is used within Chocolatey. There are multiple IOC containers out there in the wild. The one that is being used here is Simple Injector. So we'll see here that, so this comment here is actually referring to what I think I was stating. So there's a to-do comment here that's saying we should refactor this code base so it's auto-wired, meaning that each one of these is an instance of an iCommand interface. So in theory, we could reflect on the assembly to find all of those iCommand instances rather than having to manually instantiate them here. So for now, I'm just going to add a new one to the list because we're not tackling all the things. We're not tackling all the to-do comments in Chocolatey just now. So I'm just going to instantiate a new instance of this export command, and at the minute our export command doesn't have any parameters being passed into it. So if we go back over to here, then it doesn't even have a constructor, so it's a default constructor that has no parameters being passed into it. But I know for a fact that in order to get a list of packages, we're going to need something passed into that command so that we can actually do something with it. So what we're trying to achieve, if we go back here to the command line and we do a choco list local only, we want to know what this list is. Okay, now if I look at the choco list command here, we can see that that's being passed in this thing that is the iChocolatey package service. Okay, so let's not worry too much about what that is just yet, but the fact that the choco list command is able to output all of the packages that are currently installed on the machine, then it's a fairly safe bet that we're going to need this passed into our export command in order for us to get access to that as well. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we will paste that down into here. And let's take that off. Now that's obviously going to fail because, well, we've just provided an input parameter that doesn't exist on the pin command itself. And let's just see if the pin command has it. It doesn't. So let's go to the choco list command so that we can copy some code again. So that has this passed into it. So let's just grab these 4 or 5 lines here. Copy that into our export command. And then we called it something different. So let's just copy that and paste that into there. That's missing using statement, I would suspect. Using services, there we go. And if we go back to our container binding, then that's now happy. And then if we look again at where ChocoPin is used, then it's used in the definition and it's used in the constructor. Okay, so at this point, we have everything from a container binding point of view. So in theory, we should be one step closer. So if we run this build again, which is still doing the export -h, the method or operation is not implemented. Okay. So let's see where we're getting to. So if we start setting some breakpoints, then we want a breakpoint on there. Let's just see where we're getting to in the code base, because one of these is throwing unhandled exception. So what I suspect now is that there are the other parts of the setup. Before it actually gets to the help message, it must be looking for other parts of the command implementation in order to know what's going on. So let's just set some breakpoints on these. I'm sure there's probably a quicker way of doing this, but let's do this. And ultimately the one that we're interested in, which is that one. And let's just see the constructor happening as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop that and run it again. And let's see where we get to. Okay, so it gets into the constructor, and we're passing in an instance of the package service, which has got lots of stuff in it. And then if we continue from there, then we're getting to the configure argument parser. So we're one step closer. So before you can actually execute the command, it needs to know what command line operations are being parsed. So in order to know what command parameters are being passed in, it needs to be able to parse those command arguments. So that it's a chicken and egg. In order to do the command, it needs to know that the one that we're currently executing is a valid one, right? So we're passing in choco export -h. We need to know how to pull that -h parameter out. We need to know how to pull out the export to then know that this is the one that should be getting pulled in. So if we look at the chocopin command and its configure argument parser, let's see what is going on here. Right, so this is where in this command we are specifying the option sets that are available to it. Okay, so for the chocopin command, there are arguments along the lines of name and version. So when you're pinning Chocolatey package, you have to give it a name and you have to give it the version number that you want to pin it to. Okay. Now there are some. So what I've said just now is I want to be able to run a command that is choco export, and that's essentially it. I'm not passing in any other arguments to it other than the default common arguments. So within a single command instance, I shouldn't necessarily need to configure the option sets for ones that have already been configured. Okay, they'll be handled out with. So in theory, if I just remove that not implemented exception and not provide any additional arguments to the option set and just let it run through, we should get one step further along the process as well. Now, when I come to add those additional parameters that I spoke about, which was including the version numbers and including the persisted arguments that were passed in, then that's where we would add additional option sets so that we would include the parsing those additional arguments. So for now, we now need to handle the additional argument parsing. So again, we're one step further down the chain. So let's look at the handle additional argument parsing and see what this is saying. So this is where we have the option of taking those parsed arguments and making an informed decision about what needs to happen at this point. Okay, so I'm just going to start with all of this, and we will bring it into the Choco export command, and we will start deleting and changing what is needed. So here we were saying that if the unparsed arguments.count is greater than 1, what we're saying here, what the error is a single pin command must be listed. Please see the help menu for more information. So if there are arguments passed into our export command that haven't been parsed successfully, then we want to throw an error as well, because potentially someone has then written Choco export Bob and Bill, right? So that's an invalid command, and if they haven't been parsed correctly, then we want to throw an error. So what we're saying here is, if the unparsed arguments count is greater than 1, we're going to throw a new application exception that says, let's just keep it simple for now, and we'll say, please see the help. Please see the help menu for those commands. Please see the help menu for the export command. Let's just keep it simple just now, because it's an invalid command, and we're just going to throw an exception. Okay. Now, the command is the pin command type. So let's just have a quick look to see what this was, because it looks like we're maybe going to need one over here as well. So this is an enumeration that is specifically for the pin command type. So when you do a pin, let's see what we can do here. So when we do choco pin, there must be an additional command on the end of it that says choco pin list. So it'll list out all the pin versions. And then there's also the ability to pass in and add and remove. So at the minute, we're not going to need any of that, because we are not going to do that. So that's the reason why I had a thought in my head as to why this was greater than 0, rather than greater than 1, rather than greater than 0. But that's because there's an expectation that there's an additional sub command passed into the pin command that we don't have at the minute as part of our export. So we'll just say if there are any additional unparsed arguments, then that's when we will fail. So we're not going to want this section, because that's specifically handling the sub command. We don't have a sub command for our export command. What we are going to want though is, let's close that one out. If we go back to the choco pin command, then over here there is a pin command that we are probably going to want to create a new one for our export. So where are we over here? This is within Chocolatey configuration. Right. So the reason that this is needed is when Chocolatey is running, there is a in-memory representation of every piece of configuration that was passed in to, or every piece of configuration that was constructed to make that command execute. Right? So if we go back to the command in here, what is being set up here is it's adding to the existing configuration, in-memory configuration object, information about what command is being executed, so that then as part of the remaining execution, you can look up those pieces of information to then know to take informed decisions about what is happening in the current process. And it's also used for logging out to the Chocolatey log everything about what's currently happening within this Chocolatey execution. So this in-memory representation of the configuration needs to be updated with information about the export command that's currently being executed. So we're going to need to update that Chocolatey configuration with a new section that is our export command. So let's just stub this out. So we're going to want export command configuration. That's obviously not going to exist yet, but we will create it. Configuration, and we'll just call this the export command. Spell that properly, and then on here we're going to have a getter and a setter. We will worry about adding some comments later, but if we just go and have a look at what's in here, then this is where we're actually serializing the Chocolatey config either to disk or reading it back from disk. So let's just create a new one. Let's go to the bottom here, and we're going to create a public sealed class, which is the export command configuration. Is that what we called it? I think it was export command configuration. That was, yes, it was. And at the bottom here, we shall have, let's add serializable to that as well. Perfect. And then let's have a quick look at the pin command. So at the minute, again, because we don't have those additional parameters, we don't have those additional pieces of information, we don't actually need that file because there's nothing to set on it. But I think creating it is useful because it means that we will have that when we need it. Although this one is of interest to me. Where does that command come from? That is on. Interesting. Let's check that one out. So that was over in here. We should now hopefully have an export command, but it doesn't have that. So that must be that. Okay. Well, we're going to want to create a new instance of it here. So this is the export command equals new export command configuration. But where does that guy get its command property from? Where does he come from? I think we want to, at the very least, we want to. Oh, so that's the sub command. Okay, so we don't want that. Or rather, we don't have that right now. So that's the sub command. So we don't have that. We haven't set any sources. Well, we can set that, but it's not needed at the minute. That is the equivalent of what we're going to want to set. Let's come back to that one too. Okay, so those things we, at the very least, see that we don't actually need that either. Okay, so let's not worry about any of that just now. Let's just keep it simple for now. So all we're doing here is we're handling additional argument parsing. So we're saying that if there are any unparsed arguments, we're going to throw an exception. And so we can test that part out. So if we set a breakpoint here, and we go back into our Chocolatey console, and we put in Bob, right? So we're going to run this. And we're going to get to our constructor. Now, at this point, our unparsed arguments count is 1. So our unparsed arguments is this unknown argument called Bob. So notice that the -h command, or rather, the -h parameter that we passed in has successfully been parsed because there's other code that's already taken part, handled the common command line switches that can be passed into any Chocolatey command. So the only one that's erroring here is the Bob one. And if we step through that code, then that will throw an exception. So we're at a point there where we are then outputting, please see the help menu for the export command. Okay, so what we want to see here, if we go back to this and we remove that extra parameter and we run the build again, so now we should have no unparsed arguments, which we don't, and in theory, if everything works, we should get to the help message because that -h has been successfully parsed by other parts of the code base, and that has then triggered the execution of the help message for this instance of the command. So now we should get may require admin access. May require admin access. What do we need to do here? So again, let's look at what's going on before. And then the may require admin access must be a helper check to see whether it needs to be an elevated process or not. So what this is saying here is config, get configuration settings, if config equals null, return true. And then if that returns false, then we return the command not equal to the list. So for what we want to do, let's have a look and see what was done in the list command. Because again, we will be copying a lot of what's in the list command. So let's just have a quick look. Let's see how it's implemented this check. May require admin access has returned false. So we're not, all that's happening as a part of the execution of Choco list is really just reading some files from the file system. So we don't need an elevated command shell specifically for that purpose. We're not doing an install of an application. We're not doing an uninstall of an application. So we can just say here for the export command, which is really going to be doing the same thing, is we'll just say return false for that one as well. So back into our export command, we'll just stop the debugging. And in here, we're going to say return false. And then once more, let's run that and see what we get. I think we can take that breakpoint out because we're kind of finished with that. We are parsing that's still going to be the same. It's going to export that. It's going to return false for the may require admin access. And then we're going to get some output. So the output that we've seen here is export command. So that's what we output here from our Choco log. And then everything else here is outputting the common command line arguments that can be passed into any Chocolatey command. So there's nothing else that we need to do here in terms of, so our export command is now effectively running, right? So let's just stop that again. Okay, so we now have all of the basic parts that we would want to invoke that export command. So that was possible by the addition of this. So the addition of this at the top made it so that the export keyword was used as the entry point for that export command that we passed into the debug options. And we've successfully parsed the non-existent command line parameters that the export command is relying on. And we have, at the minute, written out a help message, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So what we want to do next is actually put something into the run. So right now, if we go back to Chocolatey console and we take out that -h, so it's not going to go into the help message anymore, and we just run the export command itself, we should get another not implemented exception because we haven't actually done any code yet. So again, we get past this point and we handle the validation. So we're not doing something in here. So let's have a look at the handle validation. So what we're saying here is if configuration pin command.command is not equal to list or those things. New application exception. When specifying the hub command, you must specify name, etc. So this is an opportunity to do additional validation once all of those parsed and unparsed arguments are sent through. So again, for what we're trying to do right now, we don't need to do anything there at the minute. So let's run that one more time. And this should get slightly further, and we should actually get into the run. So at this point, we actually want to do some work. We want to list out those installed packages, and we want to put them somewhere. So at the minute, we've got a not implemented exception. So let's start thinking about what we need to do there. So the starting point for that will be in the run of ChocoList. So in here, we have, let's just grab this, copy this, and put that into our export command in here. So we're doing the exact same thing as the ChocoList is doing. And that is named differently. That's just configuration. So let's just keep that consistent. Let's copy that and put that into here. So its name is the same. And note, must leave toList here or else the method won't be evaluated. So that must mean I need a generic system link at the top. Okay, so we save that and run that. Then currently our export command will do the exact same thing as the list command. So let's take this off, run that, take that off, and then run that. And then what we should get, hopefully, is nothing. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, that's bad. Okay, I'm going to stop that. So, the reason that happened is because of what I said before. So, during the parsing of the ChocoList command, it would have looked to see if it had a -lo parameter passed in, and that would have caused it to list out only the packages that are installed locally on my machine. ChocoList, without any parameters, goes to chocolatey.org and lists out all the packages from chocolatey.org. Now that's a discussion for a different day as to whether, and that's come up recently in the Gitter channels, but effectively what's happened there is it went out to chocolatey.org, downloaded information about all those packages and started listing them. Now in the ChocoList command, when we parse those arguments, we would have handled that local only command, and that would have been added into the list command local only property. So it would have known to do those things locally. Now we haven't done that here in the export command, and that's why it did the default thing, which is just to go out to chocolatey.org and pull it in. So we need to do things slightly differently. So in here, we can look at the list run command to see what that's actually doing, to then know what we need to pass in. So the list run is on the Chocolatey package service, and in here we will so the question is, do we want to reuse this, which I think we do, and if so, we need to specify, we need to match the parameters of the list command that we want to force the export command to work the way we want it to. So what is this actually doing? It's for every perform runner function list.run yield, and then for every one of those it's adding packages in. What do we want to do here? I'm just going to have a quick look for reference purposes as to what is going on in the Chocolatey GUI, because we may want to just do the same thing that Chocolatey GUI is doing. So in the source code for that, there will be a, let's just have a look for export. Local, that could be where we want to go. Yeah, that must be it. So in here, we've got export all. So then it's saying what it wants to load it up to for each packages and packages. Okay, so it's doing it slightly differently. So that's not going to be helpful. Okay, back to the drawing board. So perform source runner function config list.run. So what's that doing? That's not going to help. Where were we here? Go to implementation of the list run command and then go to implementation on this one. That's going to be on the NuGet service. So the NuGet service is the underlying. So Chocolatey by default, Chocolatey is built on top of NuGet. So there are some services that we utilize still that are using the NuGet code base. So it's one level down from where Chocolatey is. So the NuGet service is really all about looking at the packages that are extracted on the file system. So in here, it is, this is where all the information is being passed in terms of how it's configured or what it's being asked to do. So if what I'm getting at is I'm wondering whether we can call this NuGet list directly rather than calling the list command, we'll go one level down, which is to execute the NuGet service directly, which I think might make sense. So we're not doing a search, but we are doing get packages. So we could do NuGet list, get packages, and then I think that would get us everything that we want. So list run, what other methods are available in the NuGet service? It's got list and list run. The config, it's looking at the list command, which we would have as local only. And then what it's returning is an IEnumerable package result. So that's really what we're interested in. So I'm wondering whether we do the following. So let's go back to our container binding, and at the minute I'm going to borrow this, which is the NuGet service, and I'm going to also pass that in here to my container binding for the export command, which is obviously going to fail. And if we go to our, that was the install, that was the pin command, really? Then, yeah, so we're going to need to borrow one of these. And the export command, let's go back up here and add another private one there. And we'll borrow the definition of the NuGet service here. Copy that into our constructor here with a comma. Then we have all the pieces that we can do NuGet service equals NuGet service. Okay. So down here, let's keep this around so we can see what's going on. But if we then say NuGet service dot list dot list run, now that needs a configuration object. So we have the configuration object at this point, but we haven't set it up to be configured the way we need it to be in order to run just the list. And what we should get back here is a list of packages. Okay, so the configuration that we are interested in to make this work is, that was not in that one, that was in the NuGet service. In order to get it to work the way we want it to, we are going to need to set those sources. Oh, that's an interesting one as to whether we need to include pre-release. That's interesting. We'll have to think about that one. So let's go back and look at the setting of the sources. Where was that done? That was here. So let's make sure that this is set up so that that flows through. Actually, we want both of these lines that are here. So this is in the additional argument parsing. Our additional argument parsing is here. Yeah, no, I know, Kim. So Kim's saying local only overrides default. Yes, I know. I'm just wondering whether my thought process that I had there was whether the export command would be useful for other sources as well. So putting them in makes sense, I think. But let's leave a note, as you said there. So to do this might not be required. So we're setting the list command's local only to be true. So we're forcing the local only to be true when it gets into the NuGet service, which is here. So yes, Kim's right. So we're actually doing that work there when we set the local only. Pre-release is being set to true as well, so it's being forced into that. Okay, so we might not need either of those things. Okay, fine. We don't need. Well, we will need that one. So we're setting local only to true, which then does all of this stuff, and then the output of that should be what we're interested in. So we've now got, by setting that one piece of configuration on the list command, we're then passing that down through the levels into the NuGet service, and at that point we should here get a list of packages that at the minute we'll just have one, because that's the only package that I have installed in this instance of Chocolatey. So let's go ahead and play this and see where we get to. Exiting with code 0. Interesting. Did I not set a breakpoint? I didn't set a breakpoint, what I want it to be. So the exit with code 0 is good, because that means there were no failures, and it did what we told it to. I just didn't have a breakpoint to see what we actually got back. Now, the reason it didn't list it out to the command window is because we went one level down. If we had continued to use the list command directly on the package service, it would have taken all of those packages and written it out to the command line. But we don't want to do that with the export command. We just want the list of packages. So at this point, if I hit F10, we should get a, hopefully, this function requires elevation to run all threads. So we can't see the, so I'm not running this. No, that's not true. I am running as administrator. So why is that not showing me? We may have to call toList on that then, won't we? In the same way that we did before. so it didn't actually evaluate it, and that's what the error message or the warning above is about. So let's do this. So at this point, if we F10 over this, then we get we've got a single package result, and that should be, if I look at this part, am I getting the one that I want? Then the package is that .NET version detector. It's maybe hard for, it's maybe not coming across there, but there is a package that is .NET version detector. So at this point, we have all of the packages that we need. And I think we're then at a position where we can start looking at writing that out to a file. So to save some time, let's just steal some code. So I'm going to just borrow this one. There's a for each in there. Okay, so I'm just going to borrow this. So this code is not going to be the way that we want it to be, because Chocolatey GUI doesn't have the same file system abstraction that Chocolatey itself does. So this is not going to be the way that it's ultimately going to be, but I just want to see if we can get it to actually work. So this is going to be for each package in packages. We're going to take out the package ID. So at the minute, I'm going to comment that line out, because I don't necessarily want to include the version numbers by default. I'm going to make that an input parameter to say whether or not to include the version number. Why does that not like package? Oh, it's going to be package.package.id, is it? There we go. The whole package.package thing is because each one of these is actually a package information, which is a kind of a higher level class than what you would think of as just a package. So I've had to go package.package.id to get that information. Let's just see where persistent service.save file. So we want to create a file, settings. Oh, let's take that. It's that one. Copy. Put this up here. Bar settings, and then we need a file stream. The file stream was coming from some persistent service. So again, let's just borrow some code just to see what's going on there. So there must be a services here and a persistent service, and the save file is just, oh, it's running out to save file dialog, yada yada yada. I don't think we need that. So what we want is an XML writer.create. Naming is hard. Possibly, yes, Manfred. So the comment in the chat there is whether we should change packages to package infos. So I think that's probably a good idea. So let's call this package informations. That's a great name. How's about that? IEnumerable package result. Let's just check to see what that is. Let's get the naming right here for this one. So a package result has a package. Okay, so let's just call it package results then. Let's do it that way. So this is, let's undo that, and undo that, and then let's do it properly. And then we're going to do new name, package results. So for each, let's rename this then, for each package result in package results. Then we've got a package in the ID, element ID, yada yada yada. And then what does this need? String output file name. So let's just call this at the minute. This is not how it's going to work ultimately, but we've got packages.config. Let's just make it a little bit let's try and output it to that location. So C temp, let's delete the one that we had earlier. And then let's see where we get to with this. I suspect I'm missing some. Oh, it's a using statement, so that's why I don't need to flush it and end it, because it's already done. So let's see what we've got here then. Let's run this and see where we get to. Okay, so for each package results, we're going to indent it. We're going to start a new document. We're going to add packages as a start element. We're going to enumerate through those and add a package with an ID. So that was hopefully something along the lines of the package. Yes, that's right. And then we can run that through completion. And then hopefully, the end result of that is... Oh, interesting. Not necessarily sure we want that to be output there, but we'll come back to that. I didn't think that was going to do that. But now, in theory, we should have a packages.config file. So over here, we've now got a packages.config file that has a list of packages that is representative of what we have installed on our machine. So, I think that then is a reasonably good place to bring this stream to a close. So just a quick recap. We have created a new Chocolatey export command that derives from iCommand, that is an interface that defines how that command is going to operate. We've defined that that command is going to be triggered on the word export. We've then looked at how we can parse the command line arguments to ensure that the expected arguments have been handled correctly. So in our case, we don't actually have any additional arguments yet. But what we have had to set is a local only property on another command, because we're kind of reusing the functionality of the list command to utilize what we actually want to do, which is to get a list of all the packages that are installed. And then having done that, we have then ran that command and then taken the output of those package results and then created a new file ready to be used some way. So there's lots of things that we need to tidy up here. For example, at the minute we've got a hard-coded location here. We should probably accept that as an input parameter that might default to packages.config just at the root of where Choco is being executed. We need to look into a parameter that optionally includes the version numbers that are currently installed. We need to look at this no-op. We haven't looked at the no-op yet, so we need to add some code in there to say what would happen if that command was executed, but it wasn't actually ran. It was passed in with a no-op flag. We need to augment this help command to actually provide some better help documentation. And then the global choco help command. So if we go choco -h here, then currently the export command is not being featured here. So we need to find and augment that section of the code so that we include this new export command so that people know about it. And so those are kind of the top level things that we kind of still need to do. So I'll leave that for the next stream. So we'll tidy this up a little bit, but we'll bring this to a close just now. Let's just close this and have something that let's just add a to-do comment here so that we know why we left this here. To do, add parameter to specify whether to include version number or not. This we'll have to do as a to-do as well. To do, use file system abstraction rather than direct, because that will flow into the unit tests and the integration tests that we want to run as part of this. If we don't do that, then testing this is going to be hard. But if we use the file system abstraction, then we can lock that file system so that we can run the tests that we need to do. We fill that in. So let's just do it. Do here. Implement this. And to do add actual help command. And in here, we're going to have additional arguments to parse. Additional validation. No, it's not going to be done there. It's going to be here to do handle parsing of what we're going to have. Likely, we're going to have file name, output file name, output name, output file name, something like that. And we're also going to have include version numbers, like that. Whoa. Include version numbers. So we're going to need to parse those things out. And we're going to need to add option sets up here. Add option sets. Add option set for 2 new arguments. I think the comment that Kim's made there, I think my combination of using Synergy from my Mac to allow my keyboard and mouse to appear on this Windows computer to then go into my Vagrant VM, which is my Windows machine that I'm doing this work on, means that sometimes things like that happen. But also, as Manfred maybe points out, that's maybe just the way I talk, and that's as a result the way that I want to type it as well. I like that. Let's go with that. Okay, so I think that is it. Actually, let's just tidy this up a little bit. So we decided that we don't even need that package service. So we'll take that guy out, and we'll take this guy out just now. And as a result, that's going to mean that my container binding is broken, because it's not going to have that package service anymore. So let's just tidy that up a little bit too. So we've only got the NuGet service now. There we go. And okay, so we've got a list of to-dos that we need to do, and we have a semi-functioning. So let's do one test, and then I'll call it a day. So let's go and delete that packages.config file from there. Let's go to our command up here, and we'll do a install of winderstat. So let's install that guy. So at that point, we should have 2 packages installed in our local Chocolatey instance. And as a result of that, when we do the export, we should have 2 entries in the packages.config file. So let's just test this out to make sure that this works the way we expect it to. I could have done that one with AS, yes. I could have done cake.portable, but I didn't because you were too late. So let's just test this out. Choco list local only, just to make sure that we're getting 2 entries in our output, which we are. Good. And then if we go back and change our export command to be in there now, in theory, we should have a new packages.config file created. Where are we? We're there. Let's just let it run. Let's run. So we've got a new packages.config file that have 2 entries in it. So I think we're onto something here. The other thing we need to check is why it's. I don't think we want this to be output as part of the execution of our export command. So we need to look into why that's being output to the command line and how we can have that not happen. So that's something else we need to do. So let's just add a note for ourselves here as well. So top level to-dos are going to be, let's just put them up here. To do, don't output list of packages to console, and then we want to update top level help document with export command. Anything else that I had to do? I think those were the main things, weren't they? Yada yada yada. Okay, I think I'm good with that. So I will commit this and add it into my fork, ready for starting to do the work of actually submitting the pull request, which is kind of the ultimate ultimately where we're trying to get to. Any questions on anything that's happened in this stream? Anything didn't make sense that we want to quickly go over? Otherwise, if not, I will draw it to a close, and we can pick this up next week. So my intention would be to continue this exploration into the code base on next week's stream and get it finalized and hopefully get it submitted for review. The week after, I am not available for a stream because I will be traveling into England to do a series of talks. So if anyone is on the stream who is in Englandshire, as I like to call it, then I am going to Sheffield, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, and then on the way back up the road, I've got a talk in Glasgow where I'm going to be talking on chocolatey, cake, and also a new talk that I'm doing on Packer and Terraform. So if anybody's in any of those cities on those dates, definitely feel free to come along. So as a result of that, I won't be available to do a stream on the 28th because I'm not here. But the following week, I will be back, and if all goes well, I will have a guest on the show, assuming I've got my dates correct. We'll have a guest on the show to talk about using a command line parsing utility called Spectre CLI. And what we're going to do is we are going to do let's just have a github.com git tools git release manager. What we're going to look at doing is updating this tool, Git Release Manager, to use that new Spectre CLI command line parser, which is a .NET Core first command line parser that makes parsing those command line arguments really easy. And on the show, hopefully, my maintainer friend from the Cake build project, Patrick Svensson, will be on the call. And he's going to be walking me through how to go about adding Spectre CLI into this application. Now, that all hinges on being able to pull him into the stream. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. As some of you may know, I sometimes have an inability to even turn on my microphone when the stream starts, let alone doing anything else. So I've got a little bit of work to do to figure out how all that pieces come together. But that will be then, and then I've got plans for another stream that will involve another person. I haven't got too many details around that yet, but keep an eye out for that. What I am planning on doing is I am planning on updating this README in this repository with kind of upcoming talks, upcoming streams, and upcoming topics for those streams. So again, if you haven't seen this repository before, there is a list of issues in here that contain suggestions and ideas for what should be talked about. So obviously this stream was about this export command. So if there are any topics that you feel I would be able to help with, whether it's on Cake, whether it's on Chocolatey, whether it's on something else, feel free to add an issue into this repository. One suggestion that keeps coming up is these kind of two here, how to create a Chocolatey package from scratch and how to take that kind of manually updating package and convert that into an automated package. So probably after the ones that I've got lined up, that will be the next one that gets targeted. So if that's of interest to you, keep an eye out on the readme.mv for when those streams will potentially hit. Once we start getting into later in the year, I've got at least 2 trips in March that will mean that I won't be able to do streams on those days. But again, my intention is to keep this stream as consistent as possible. So it's always going to be on a Monday evening at 8 p.m. GMT, unless something comes up that means that I am not able to do that. Okay, so that's it from me. Last chance, if there's any questions, now's the time to do it. We can stream from the US. Okay, so the comment that Matthias is making there is the stream in question, which involves at least 2 members of the Cake team. Some of us are, or at least 4 or 5 of us on the Cake team are MVPs, and all of us are going over to the MVP summit in Seattle, and that's one of the trips that I've got in March. So I think what Matthias is suggesting here is that we could get together somewhere while we're in person and stream from a location. I don't know, Matthias. That would mean hotel Wi-Fi though, right? That would be the only issue. So I'm not sure if that's going to fly too well, unless we borrow some from somewhere else. But anyway, that's it from me. Feel free to reach out, like I say. I'm happy to take on any suggestions or any ideas for how to do things differently on this. Definitely interested in hearing what your thoughts are. So feel free to reach out on the there's a Twitter profile, which is just Get13, and this video, once I have encoded it or decoded it, will be uploaded to YouTube as well. So thank you very much. With that, I'm going to sign off, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you very much.